The rain had been falling since midnight when instructor Nora Vasquez arrived at Fort Harlan Military Preparatory School at 5:47 in the morning. She was 36 years old, medium height, with olive skin, dark eyes that seemed to absorb everything without giving anything back, and black hair she kept cropped close to her skull. She wore her uniform like a second skin, pressed and clean even in the rain, even at 6 in the morning, even after a night where she'd slept maybe 3 hours. Old habits, the kind that didn't break no matter how many years passed. Fort Harlan wasn't a real fort. It hadn't been since the 1950s, when the Army sold the land to a private corporation that eventually turned it into a military prep school for families with more money than patience for their children. The buildings were old brick and new glass, a collision of eras that somehow worked. The grounds were immaculate. The curriculum was rigorous on paper. In practice, it depended entirely on which instructor you had and which students were in the room. Nora had been teaching advanced combat theory and physical conditioning for 4 months. She'd taken the position because her therapist suggested structure, because her sister begged her to get out of the apartment, because she couldn't sleep anyway, and at least this way the sleepless hours meant something. She didn't love the job. She didn't hate it either. It was something to do with her hands and her mind and the parts of herself that still needed to be useful. Most of the students left her alone. They showed up, did the work, went home. That was enough. Nora didn't need them to like her. She didn't need anyone to like her. She needed them to learn, and most of them did, quietly and without incident, which was all she asked. But there were 5 cadets who made every single day harder than it needed to be. They were called the Foundation by other students, a name they'd given themselves because they believed the school ran on their family's money and influence, which wasn't entirely untrue. Cadet Jordan Whitfield led the group, a 19-year-old with his father's political ambitions already written into his posture, his jawline, his practiced smile. His father was a governor. His grandfather had been a senator. Jordan had grown up in rooms where people looked at him like he was already important, and he had never once been given reason to question that assessment. Standing beside him were Cadet Priya Shetty, whose family owned 3 pharmaceutical companies and who treated every room she entered like a boardroom she was about to take over. Cadet Damian Cross, tall and broad-shouldered with the kind of physical confidence that came from being the biggest person in every room since the age of 14. Cadet Felix Huang, quiet and calculating, the one who watched and waited and knew where every pressure point was, and Cadet Serena Walsh, whose sharp tongue had made grown men flinch, and who considered cruelty an art form. Together they moved through Fort Harlan like they owned it, because in every way that mattered to them, they did. Nora had been warned about them during her orientation. Director Pemberton, a former Army colonel with tired eyes and a desk buried under paperwork, had said it plainly. Those 5 are going to give you trouble. The school needs their families' continued financial support. Handle it carefully, which Nora had understood to mean that she was expected to tolerate things she shouldn't have to tolerate and smile while doing it. She had not smiled. Her first encounter with the Foundation had been on her second day. Jordan had walked into her classroom 25 minutes late, coffee in hand, talking loudly on his phone. Nora had waited until he finished the call. Then she told him that in her classroom, late arrival meant 100 push-ups, phone calls meant 200, and coffee on the training floor meant he was running 5 miles after dismissal. Jordan had stared at her like she'd said something in a foreign language. She'd stared back. He'd put the phone away. He hadn't run the 5 miles, but he hadn't come in late again either, at least not for a week. The tension between Nora and the Foundation had grown steadily over 4 months. She failed Serena for cheating on a written assessment. She reported Felix for accessing her personnel file through the school's computer system. She gave Damian 3 formal warnings for aggressive behavior toward other cadets. She documented everything, every incident, every violation, every conversation. A habit from her previous life, where documentation was the difference between a mission succeeding and someone dying. Jordan, for his part, had been building towards something. Nora could see it. She'd spent 9 years reading people in high-pressure environments, learning how they moved, what their eyes did before they made a decision, when they were planning something, and when they were just running their mouths. Jordan wasn't just running his mouth. He was building towards something specific, something designed to break her in a way she couldn't report or document or survive professionally. She just didn't know what it was yet. It happened on a Thursday in late October during a full-gear training exercise. The cadets were supposed to spend the morning in full combat uniform, navigating an obstacle course while carrying weighted packs. It was an endurance test, meant to simulate the physical demands of sustained field operations. Nora ran it with them, same gear, same weight, same conditions. She always did. She decided early on that she wouldn't ask her students to do anything she wouldn't do herself. The foundation had other plans for the day. The exercise had been running for about 90 minutes when Nora directed the group toward the final obstacle, a rope climb followed by a wall traverse and a 10-foot drop into a landing pit. Nora demonstrated the sequence first, moving through it quickly and cleanly. Then she stepped aside and began calling cadets through one at a time. Jordan went last. Nora was recording completion times on her tablet when she heard the others close in behind her. She registered the movement before she consciously processed it, the way you register a sound before you know what made it. She started to turn. But they were already there. Jordan grabbed her right arm. Damien grabbed her left. Before she could react, Felix had her tablet. Priya was stepping back to watch, and Serena was already saying something in a low voice that Nora couldn't quite hear over the sound of blood rushing to her ears. "Let go," Nora said. Her voice was absolutely flat, not a request, a statement of what should happen next. Jordan smiled. "We just have a question for you, instructor. We've been doing some research. We couldn't find anything about your service record. No deployments, no unit assignments, no commendations, nothing. It's like you don't exist." "Let go of my arms," Nora said. "It's a simple question. Where did you serve?" Nora assessed the situation in the time it took to draw a breath. Jordan on her right, grip firm but amateur, thumb on top where it shouldn't be. Damien on her left, stronger grip, better position, more dangerous. Felix 3 feet back, holding the tablet, not a physical threat. Priya 5 feet back, observer. Serena 2 feet to her left, no grip, no physical threat, the distraction element. She could break free. She could put Jordan on the ground in under 2 seconds and Damien in under 5. She could end this before any of them understood what was happening. But there were 12 other cadets watching, and she didn't want them watching her hurt someone, even someone who deserved it. "This is your last warning," Nora said. "Release me or face disciplinary action." Jordan leaned closer. "See, the thing is, instructor, I don't think there's going to be any disciplinary action. I think you're going to answer our question, and then we're going to go back to class, and nothing is going to happen." He reached forward with his free hand and grabbed the collar of her uniform jacket. She felt the fabric pull tight across her shoulders. In her peripheral vision, she saw Damien adjust his grip. She felt the seam along her right shoulder begin to strain. "Don't," she said. Jordan yanked. The right shoulder of her uniform jacket tore open along the seam, fabric peeling back to expose the top of her arm and part of her shoulder. Nora felt the cool October air on her skin. She heard Serena make a satisfied sound. She heard a few of the watching cadets make sharp noises of surprise. And then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Jordan was staring at her shoulder. His hand was still holding the torn piece of fabric, but his grip on her arm had gone slack without him seeming to notice. Damien had let go entirely. Felix had lowered the tablet. Even Serena had stopped talking. Nora looked at her own shoulder. The torn jacket had exposed what lay beneath, a tattoo that covered her entire upper arm and shoulder in precise, intricate detail. It wasn't decorative, it was a record. A series of names ran in 2 columns down her upper arm, written in letters so small they required close reading. Above the names, a trident, the symbol of the Naval Special Warfare Community. Below the names, a date. Above the trident, the eagle, globe, and anchor alongside it. 19 names. Each one a person. Each one a specific person. Each one someone who had died while serving in a unit that most people didn't know existed. Jordan was still staring. His face had gone from smug to confused to something approaching comprehension, but comprehension was arriving slowly, the way bad news always does, giving you just enough time to understand that what you're feeling is about to get worse. "What is that?" Felix said quietly. It wasn't a mocking question, it was a real one. Nora reached up with her free hand and pulled the torn jacket back across her shoulder. She turned to face Jordan. He released her arm without being told to. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Director Pemberton's office, all 5 of you, now." She picked up her tablet from where Felix had set it down on the ground. She made a note of the time. Then she walked toward the main building without looking back. She didn't need to look back. She could hear their footsteps following. Director Pemberton was not having a good morning when Nora walked into his office. He was on the phone with someone important, judging by his expression. He held up a finger asking her to wait. Nora sat down in the chair across from his desk and folded her hands and waited. The 5 cadets filed in behind her and stood along the wall. Pemberton looked at them, then at Nora, then at the torn sleeve of her jacket. His face shifted through several expressions in rapid succession. He ended the phone call. Nora placed her tablet on his desk without speaking. The screen showed footage from the exercise field's external cameras, a wide angle that had captured the whole sequence, the approach from behind, the grabbing of both arms, the tearing of the uniform. The footage was time-stamped and clear. Pemberton watched it twice. Then he set the tablet down and looked at the 5 cadets. He started to speak. Then he stopped. Then he looked at Nora. She answered the question he hadn't asked yet. "I'm not pressing charges. I'm not requesting expulsion. What I'm requesting is 30 days of mandatory remedial training under my direct supervision. All 5 of them, effective tomorrow morning." Pemberton stared at her. "These students' families." "I'm aware of their families," Nora said. "I'm requesting 30 days of remedial training." Jordan stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'd like to." Nora turned and looked at him. One look, just one. Jordan stopped talking mid-sentence. Pemberton looked at the tablet again. He looked at the cadets. He looked at Nora. 30 days, he said finally, starting tomorrow, 5 in the morning. Nora stood, picked up her tablet and walked out. None of the 5 cadets said a word until they were in the hallway. Then Jordan said, quietly, "What was on that tattoo?" Nobody answered him. After dinner, Nora sat alone in the instructor's lounge, reading, or trying to read. The words kept sliding off the page. She kept seeing Jordan's face the moment he'd seen her shoulder. The way the smug certainty had drained out of him like water out of a broken glass. She pulled up the sleeve of her replacement jacket and looked at the tattoo herself. She did this sometimes. Not for comfort exactly, but for something that wasn't quite comfort and wasn't quite grief. Something in between. 19 names. She'd added each one herself, sitting in a chair in a shop in San Diego, reading the names she'd written on a piece of paper while the artist worked. 19 separate sessions. Some sessions she'd sat in complete silence. Some sessions she'd talked nonstop about the person whose name was going on her skin. Some sessions she'd sat and cried without making any sound at all, which she'd been trained to do in circumstances where silence was survival, and which turned out to be useful in tattoo shops too. The last name had gone on 8 months ago, 3 weeks before she'd accepted the position at Fort Harlan. She pulled her sleeve back down. Tomorrow they'd start. The 5 cadets showed up at 5 in the morning the next day. Nora was already on the field, wearing black fatigues. The temperature was 38 degrees. The ground was frozen. The sky was the color of dirty pewter. She looked at them. She said, "We're running." They ran 12 miles. through the woods behind the campus, through a frozen creek, up a hill that turned out to be significantly steeper than it looked from the bottom. Nora ran ahead of them the entire way. She didn't slow down. She didn't check on them. She trusted them to either keep up or fall behind, and those who fell behind would have to explain why to Director Pemberton. Nobody fell behind. They were gasping and stumbling, and Priya was crying silently from somewhere around mile 8, but nobody fell behind. When they returned to the field, Nora had them carry sandbags. Then she had them build a shelter from materials she'd left in a pile near the tree line, poles and canvas and rope and stakes. Damien thought he knew how to do it and started giving orders. The shelter fell down twice. By the third attempt, all 5 of them were working together in silence, listening to each other, and it stood. "Good," Nora said. It was the first positive word she'd said all morning. Then she told them to take it apart and do it again faster. This was the pattern of the 30 days. Physical exhaustion in the morning, technical instruction in the afternoon. No praise except when something was genuinely earned, and even then it was brief. No mockery, no cruelty, no games, just work. On the 5th day, during a land navigation exercise, Serena twisted her ankle stepping into a hidden dip in the terrain. She went down hard, grabbing her leg and swearing. The others looked at her, then at Nora. Nora walked over, crouched down, examined the ankle. Not broken, sprained, likely mild. She looked up at Serena. "Can you walk on it?" "I think so." "Then we keep going. Stay close to Damien. He'll slow the pace on your side." "Why Damien?" Serena said through gritted teeth. "Because he's the strongest and the most likely to catch you if you fall again. Move." They moved. Damien stayed close to Serena. Felix adjusted his position to cover her right flank. Nobody said anything about it. They just did it. Nora watched this happen and made a small note on her tablet. On the 12th day, she sat them down after morning training and told them about the tattoo. Not all of it. Not in the way she talked to her therapist or her sister or the 2 surviving teammates who still called her every few weeks just to check. But enough. She told them about the unit she'd served in. She told them what the unit did and what it cost. She told them that the names on her arm were people she had known personally, worked alongside, eaten meals with, laughed with, argued with, trusted with her life. She told them about the mission 8 months ago that had ended her active service. She told them some of what happened during that mission, the parts she was allowed to speak about, and she described the aftermath. She told them because she thought they needed to know what service actually looked like. Not the version from movies, not the version from political speeches, but the real version, which was ordinary people making impossible choices and living with the consequences until they couldn't anymore. When she finished, the 5 of them were quiet for a long time. Then Jordan said the names. "All 19, were they all?" "Yes," Nora said, "every one of them." Another silence, longer. Priya said quietly, "I'm sorry we tore your jacket." Nora looked at her. "I know." On the 19th day, something shifted. Nora noticed it during a team obstacle course exercise where the 5 cadets had to move through a sequence of challenges while keeping all team members engaged and supported. In the first week, they would have approached it the way they approached everything: Jordan taking charge, Serena undermining him, Felix calculating angles, Priya keeping score, Damien following whoever seemed strongest. Now they moved differently. Jordan still led, but he listened before he directed. Serena's sharpness had turned outward, toward the obstacles instead of toward the people beside her. Felix used his analytical instincts to solve problems instead of find leverage. Priya's competitive drive was oriented toward the course rather than her teammates, and Damien's physical strength was deployed in service of the group rather than the domination of it. They weren't a different group. They were the same group operating closer to what they could be. Nora ran the course with them. At the final obstacle, a 12-foot wall with no handholds that required 2 people to boost a third while the first 2 then climbed with assistance from above, Jordan locked his hands together to give Nora a boost without being asked. She met his eyes briefly. Then she stepped into his hands and went up. On the final day, the 30th, she brought them back to the spot on the exercise field where it had happened. The torn jacket was long since disposed of, but they all knew the place. The frozen ground had thawed and frozen again twice since then. Nora stood facing them. She wasn't wearing a torn jacket today. She wasn't wearing anything that showed the tattoo, but they all knew it was there. She said, "I've been doing this work for 9 years. The work of operating in environments where everything is trying to kill you and the only thing that keeps you alive is the people next to you and how much you trust them. And the thing I learned, the thing that cost me more than I can explain, is that trust isn't given because of who your family is or how much money you have or how smart you are or how physically strong you are. Trust is earned by showing up when it's hard and doing what needs to be done even when you don't want to. Every name on my arm earned that trust, every single one of them. And then they died doing what people who earn trust do." She looked at each of them in turn. "I'm not going to tell you to be like them. I'm going to tell you to figure out what it means to earn trust from the people next to you. And then I'm going to tell you that it's going to take longer than 30 days and be harder than anything you've done here and cost you things you don't even know you have yet. But it's the only thing that matters. Everything else is furniture." Jordan opened his mouth, closed it. Then he said, "Why did you request training instead of charges?" Nora was quiet for a moment. "Because someone did the same for me once, when I didn't deserve it." She turned and walked back toward the main building. Behind her, she heard 5 sets of footsteps on the frozen ground, not following her, just moving. She didn't look back. The suspension the 5 cadets received was 2 weeks. When they returned, Jordan came to find Nora before his first class. "Can I join your morning training?" he asked. "Not as punishment, just, I want to keep going." Nora looked at him for a moment. 4:30, she said. "Don't be late." He wasn't. Priya came the next morning. Felix and Damien the morning after. Serena came a week later, walking carefully on an ankle that was still not entirely happy about the situation and didn't say anything about the ankle at all. Other cadets began to notice. Within 6 weeks, Nora had 43 students showing up voluntarily at 4:30 in the morning in temperatures that regularly dropped below freezing. Jordan graduated with honors. He turned down his father's suggestion of a political career and enrolled in officer candidate school. Priya redirected her family's pharmaceutical foundation toward veterans' health care. Felix went into military intelligence. Damien became a search and rescue coordinator. Serena became a journalist who covered conflict zones and dedicated her first major piece to a name she'd looked up after reading the tattoo on a cold October morning in Virginia. Nora stayed at Fort Harlan for 3 more years. She never talked about herself unless asked directly, and even then she kept it brief. But the tattoo was always there, beneath the uniform, beneath everything. 19 names and a trident and a date. Earning trust, showing up, doing what needed to be done. That was all, that was everything.